Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you, Quynh, so much for taking time to share with this group here about your experience with Mento and beyond. Um, I guess we'll do a little quick round of intros, and then we'll share a little bit about sort of the structure of the conversation, which is we're really going to just walk through Quyen's experience of bringing Mento to Splash, her organization, which she can tell you more about as well. And we'll just have a really casual chat. And I would really encourage people to just, again, it's going to be a nice little group here. Keep it intimate. So please leave your questions. And we'll just make sure, like, the goal here is that everyone leaves this making sure they get out of the conversation what they want. So we're going to keep it really Q&A focused. We'll just do a little, I'll kickstart the combo, and then please ask all your questions. And Quynh has promised that she'll be as helpful as she can be in sharing her experiences. So we got a great partner here. So, Quynh, why don't you kick us off with a bit of an intro?
Yes. Thank you, Jamie. I am Quinn. Hi, everyone. I am the Senior Director of People at Splash Financial. We are a startup in the fintech space, headquartered in Cleveland, but we are fully remote. So that's a little bit about Splash and my role. Previously, well, I'm also based in Oakland, so I'm actually on the West Coast, in the Bay
Yeah.
Area. My
Yes.
background is heavily in recruiting, and now with this scope of work in HR. It's been really exciting to partner with people like you, Jamie, in rolling out something like Mento.
Fabulous. Um, Wonderful. So, yes, thank you so much. And also, just so folks know, I am Jamie. I'm one of the co-founders and co-CEOs here at Mento, and we're just all so grateful that you've all decided to join us. So, without further ado, um, Quynh, I'd love to just you've been at Splash for about 2 years. Do I have that right?
A
Great.
little over two.
A little over two. And y'all are 500 people?
Oh, we're
250?
100. We are small.
100. Okay, perfect. Okay, great. That's actually fabulous. So about 100 people. And so I guess maybe why don't you just walk us through sort of that journey of what you did when you first got to Splash? And then, we started kicking off conversations about a year ago. So kind of how did you get to that point of even being ready to even engage in sort of thinking about a broader L&D strategy and coaching in particular?
Yeah, so I joined Splash in a interesting time. Um, Joined as, the director of recruiting. And, with the macroeconomics, things were not, looking great with the whole tech scene, I would say. I think a lot of companies were impacted by layoffs. And so, as a startup ourselves, like we also had to, think about our trajectory, our future, and we also had layoffs. And so it's an interesting time because then instead of recruiting, my role then transitioned over into more of like people, HR. And, when layoffs happen, that impacts morale. That impacts a lot of the cultural elements of being at a company. And I can say that it wasn't silent to Splash, like I mentioned. A lot of tech companies were feeling this. And so
Mhm.
my focus really transitioned into thinking about how to better support our people. And to know that and to understand that is really being able to pulse check them. And so I think many people who are in HR, they know engagement surveys are incredibly important. And so that's something that we decided to be more intentional in launching. So we launched that with very specific questions around what can bring up morale, culture, engagement, like how people are feeling at Splash. And so one of the areas that I focused on was the engagement survey and really gathering those data and insights. And at this point in time, actually, I just revealed the fourth iteration of insights from our engagement surveys because we have now done it 4 times since I've been here. One of the factors that actually always dips lower in scores is essentially L&D, like learning and
Mm.
development opportunities, growth paths, etc. And so, given this is one of our scores that we really need to focus on, I was thinking through how can we bring more resources, opportunities, or programs that can help our employees feel like they have the support or additional resources to lean on to excel in their role. So that's where it started. That's how my role
Okay.
transitioned. It was interesting,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. And I think my purpose now is really helping people enjoy the place that they work at and, perform well. And that's where engagement is really unlocked.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so when you were looking at some of these L&D scores, I think I'm sure most people here on this call have seen some of that and have a desire to bring more development opportunities and help. It's a huge remit, and what I notice is a passion of people that are in the talent space is to help people feel and perform their best at work. That's not always as easy as said and done. So I'm curious, how were you able to sort of bridge that gap between, hey, we need to make sure that Splash is a place where people can feel like they can grow and develop, regardless of whether or not, the organization is growing headcount wise, and getting buy-in from leadership or having it be, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that gets to some of an earlier question that you asked is like, why
Mm,
choose Mento, right? Like, what
yeah,
was our journey towards selecting Mento?
yeah.
A big part of that is looking at the L&D question and the score and seeing how people feel like they want to grow more. They want to be able to get more resources. And when you think of that bucket of L&D, like traditionally, what do you think of? Like, let's implement training. Let's get some e-courses implemented. Let's send people to conferences or let's start a book club, right? We do have a book club
Hmm.
and I love book clubs, but you
Yeah,
see
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
traditional.
maybe more personal life than work life.
Right, maybe. And so like there's a lot of traditional methods of L&D and I certainly appreciate it. I
Yeah,
participate in it, but I
yeah.
do feel like sometimes it becomes a checkbox. Like, oh, let's just roll
Mhm.
this out because people are saying that they want more learning opportunities or training or support.
Mhm.
And how often do I remember a video training that I took? I will say not often. I don't know
Yes.
about you,
Wish
Jamie.
wish I did myself too, but I'm with you on that one.
Right. And
Yeah.
so I like to want to think outside the box and
Yeah.
I have had coaching before prior
Oh.
to Mento and I've been a big proponent of coaching to people outside of my professional circle. I really believe in the fact that coaching unlocks like just deep transformation. And so there are a number of reasons why I think that way and being able to kind of consolidate all of that reasoning into essentially a pitch to my leadership and say, hey, like, I want to try something different to
Mm.
help raise this score. Feel like we can really target an audience of people that are high impact that will get the benefits of coaching. And then that will then have a trickle effect of the people that they work with or that they manage. And so essentially that's kind of like my thought process and why I felt like coaching was a unique
Mm.
opportunity.
Interesting. Interesting. So you basically were like, hey, I want to do something different. I am and it sounds like this was almost like your first big, like we've skipped or we skipped at the time in your pitch, like, hey, these are some of the things we're actually not gonna do. We're not gonna do like a video or an e-course or some of these things that you're talking about. And instead, this is like did I hear that correctly?
Well, I will give you a specific situation where we
Yeah.
did have an offering for courses. We were
Mm.
partnering with a different company that had a library of like courses that people can like log into and
Right.
like, hey, I'm interested in learning this.
Mm.
And usership was so low. It was
Yeah.
a big dollar spend. And actually, we had it for over a year. And when I looked at the numbers of people who were actually accessing this resource, it was just not making a dent. And so
Yeah.
people were not actually utilizing this like
Yeah.
resource. And so I just thought it had to be something different,
Yeah.
something deeper. And I yeah, I believe in coaching. And so that's kind of like where my mindset started to shift towards offering something new.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. And so I guess how did you think about so many questions. juicy conversation here. So I guess when you went to pitch leadership, how did you think about the budgeting and the people that we could consider? You said high impact. And I have another question that I also want to ask, which is, in that process, how did you make the case for targeting the investment? I think one thing I hear a lot is we don't want to be perceived as taking something away from people. We have concerns around that. Right, like you said, part of, I think, check the box mentality is that people want perceived to give it to everyone. And so there's some concerns about only investing a certain amount of money in just a certain specific, in a subset of population. So curious to hear how some of that went for you.
Okay. So
I
many
know
questions.
so many questions. That was
I
so many.
like,
Too
where?
many. Too many. I will start at the top. So how did you think about the budget ask
Yeah.
and getting buy-in for that? Why don't we start there? And I'll feed you other questions because I have so many. Again, sorry, I could give you 10 questions right now.
Yeah, and I think that kind of comes to essentially how I partnered with Mento. When I first launched Mento, it was actually in a pilot form. So we did a pilot group first, which like the budget for that was substantially lower than what a full-fledged year-long program with more participants would look like. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was kind of my strategy. Start small. Let's do a pilot group. It's not going to make too much of a dent when it comes to like the overall budget for my budget, HR, right? And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that was something that I, was very deliberate about so that we can kind of get data, get some proof in the pudding that Mento was pitching
Yeah.
us around the
Yeah.
value of coaching in Mento specifically. So that's where we started. Um,
Okay, great.
Identifying those that would be in the pilot was also very strategic for me. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to select someone that had the decision maker's ear to be a participant. And who's going to say no to like free coaching, right? And
Yeah,
so
right.
the
100%.
five folks that I had chosen were like leaders of the company that, again, like would be very influential in their response of like do they think Mento is going to be worthwhile? Do they feel like they were benefiting from the coaching pilot? And just for clarity's sake, we did a 3-month pilot, and these five individuals got coaching and were able to get a taste of like what the experience would be. So
Mm-hmm.
that's that was my advice, or that is my advice. Start
Yeah.
small, and that was able to get us the kind of the data that we need because after the pilot, I did launch a survey in order to get some very substantial feedback from these five individuals. We asked key questions that revolved around business outcomes, like how did coaching impact that? Also, like how are you going to leverage coaching in your own personal life and your professional like life here at Splash? And at the very end, third key question was like, how does having Mento as a coaching benefit actually impact your retention and engagement here at Splash? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so those scores turned out really high. We had an overwhelmingly great response, positive, great response. And yeah, I think that I just kind of packaged it all up from the engagement survey to the pilot group to the data from the surveys. And then also what helped was then applying that to, okay, we have all these three different, like, I guess, reasons why we think that this would be a good benefit for us and good partnership. Who are we going to actually select to move forward within this program for an annual basis?
Yes.
And so that
Yes.
process was, I work with these people day in and day out, especially the leadership team, especially the decision maker. And I identified the people where they had large teams, they were a first time manager, or they were on really big company initiatives where they had to work cross functionally with other stakeholders. And so
Mm-hmm.
the impact of their growth and development would have a trickle effect. And I love that idea of that trickle effect. If you yourself, you're learning lots of things and you then apply it, the people that you surround yourself with are going to take a bit of that. And
Yep.
so essentially, like that was kind of how I packaged up it was a written proposal.
Yeah, that's great. And for how do you think about measuring the trickle effect? Is that through your engagement surveys that you do quarter?
Through the engagement
Annually?
surveys, yeah, we do engagement surveys twice a year.
Twice a
So
year, yeah,
that's
biannually.
one, but also like we have OKRs that we march towards every quarter. I think being able to see how we're doing, and we are lucky, we are a small company, right? So I would
Yep.
say as a 100-person company, I think this is a bit easier to do than a large
Mm-hmm.
company, but we are able to measure the success of the teams meeting their deliverables, right? Because the people that we are having coaching are the ones that are driving those projects from start to
Right.
finish.
Right.
The managers of those teams are the ones that we can actually evaluate and say, hey, did your team deliver?
Yeah.
And so I think those are also opportunities for us to measure success of the coaching.
Yeah, that's right. That's really interesting. And I guess one question for you is, did you have any resistance at all from any of the leads?
The decision maker, of course, right? It's a eventually after the pilot group, it was okay, let's take a look at how much this would cost annually.
Yeah.
So I think that that's one of the areas that, I then really had to build that case, that proposal around. Um, yeah, so I think the resistance was this is costly. Like, what are we gonna do about
Yep.
it? And so thinking through like the data that is available for me when it comes to like the retention rates, or attrition rates,
Yep. Yep.
thinking through cost of hire, if we were to have to replace somebody, or I wasn't certainly doing this evaluation, but like, the decision maker I was working with knows this on the top of his head. So I was like, hey, what's the risk of us consistently missing our goals? It's a revenue number, right? And
Yeah.
so I think framing it that way was super helpful for us to understand that the cost would be worthwhile.
Yeah, really interesting to hear how much of your pitch was and your conversations around this were around business needs. I think it's easy to maybe talk about, oh, well, leadership communication will be improved by X, but I think that makes it really hard to sell in at these high levels, especially when you're establishing a program for the first time. And so people are not used to maybe seeing how much a coaching program, how much what it actually looks like to invest meaningfully in some groups. Did you talk about any of, I guess, maybe some of the soft skill or leadership development benefits, or did you stay really focused on some of the business outcomes and tying it to both the performance impact that you could very clearly see from the people driving the most important initiatives, and then of course the costs of losing some of these people or not having them perform at the levels that you expect them to at the organization?
The soft skills piece was absolutely important as well.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
again, we do have the benefit of being a small company, so we all know each other. We all, you know,
Yeah, we know.
everybody's strengths and areas of improvement. But let's say one of our participants have clear, perhaps, gaps in communication,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and we identify that as one of the
Mm-hmm.
areas that this person might need to get coached on. And that's in the form of actually the program that I launched with Mento, internally with Splash, which requires a 360 to be done on each individual. And then at 360, we hope to see improvements in the next time
Mm-hmm.
we do the 360 at the end of the coaching, which is what I intend to do at the very end of the program, right? One of those areas could be like people are getting feedback on the communication. And so they know very specifically, I should work on this with my coach. And so hopefully that they do. That's an
Mm-hmm.
intention. And so we should be able to see over the course of like the different quarters as it passes, and hopefully by the very end of the program. Again, I think we're in like month, I don't know, 4 of
Three, four?
3, 4,
Yeah.
yeah,
Post-pilot, post-pilot.
post-pilot. We are hoping
Yeah.
to see that that person perhaps has improved in their communication skills, right? And so that's the intention. And that was part of my proposal as well, that there is a very structured program to complement the Mento platform and the coaching that is
Mm-hmm.
happening, with me keeping a pulse check on things such as 360s. We have quarterly check-ins. We're going to have our quarterly check-in next week.
Super.
And those are going to be opportunities for us to see like how are things going with coaching? Are you seeing improvements within yourself? And I know that I just did I think a 3-month review with the customer success team, Alex, I
Mm-hmm.
think well,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
being able to see actually from your guys's survey how people have changed and felt about themselves as they've gotten coaching over time.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's wonderful to have complementary data. It's really valuable to kind of be able to collect it from Mento and also internally from your side. And then I guess just on that point, I mean, I love also just that you're kind of running this in parallel and thinking about this overall approach. I mean, maybe go back very quickly to the initial pitch. Was there any concern or complaints maybe even about sort of the scaled resource being taken away?
So yeah, I think with regards to the larger resource, that's a good question. That was
Yeah.
actually taken away before actually the conversation about bringing it in. So it
Okay,
was
so it's already done.
a trade-off. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trade-off.
And were people okay with that?
They
Like,
again, they weren't even using it,
yeah,
Jamie.
so they were
So
like, what thing? That's fine.
what
What
resources
tool?
do you
Yeah.
have?
They're like, if I knew what it was, I would care. Okay, that's great. And then I guess maybe reflecting back on this past year. I guess maybe actually I'm gonna go back to the original pitch actually. Why, you like you said, you're a huge believer in coaching. You've done it, you've done lots of flavors of coaching. Um, you're very experienced. Why did you end up going with Mento? Why did you feel like this was sort of the bet that you wanted to make, based on all that you know and your own learnings and experience, and of course, why you also felt like it would be a good fit for the team at Splash?
Okay, sorry, I was on mute. And he's my little puppy. He was going
Oh,
adorable.
we didn't hear, but we are always
Oh,
welcome. We'd always welcome little barks.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm okay now. He's okay. And yeah, to your question, to answer your question,
Yeah.
um, yes, I have experience coaching. I think I've been coached now for the past five, 5 years.
Yeah, with you on that one.
Yeah,
Never giving it up. Will never not be coached.
it's fantastic. And
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
um, I've had different coaches, right? A lot of different coaches.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think something that sticks out with Mento and why I was very keen to say, hey, let's take a deeper look at this particular coaching company and platform is the fact that like the coach population is from like specific industries that can provide functional mentorship versus just focusing on like more broader themes, which are important, like broader themes of leadership and personal development and things going on in your life, absolutely important. But
Yep.
to blend that with that mentorship piece, like, hey, I know exactly what you're talking about because I did that
Mhm.
at my company, was
Yeah.
the unique draw for me. Um, I mean, we have participants in this program that are working in product, engineering, finance. Some of them are, again, people leaders for the first time in that specific space. And so to have a coach that specifically can relate and
Yep.
they can say, hey, actually, let's pause really quickly on talking about my like 5, 10 year plan, but let's talk about
Yeah.
this one problem that I'm working on
Yes.
right now.
Right.
I need your
100%.
advice on because you've done this before.
Yes.
That was the unique identifier for me with Mento that was like, boom, I can use this. I do use
Hmm.
it. I love my
I do
coach.
use it. Yeah.
So
Yes.
I
And
think
you did a pilot too initially, or a trial as well.
yes,
Yeah.
I did. And so just that in itself was like the draw. And then taking a look at the platform, taking a look at some of the capabilities with regards to like the 360 and which I haven't yet used, which I do plan to with you guys, as
Yeah.
well as what else? Like I think like the way that your platform looks, it's really nice. And I think that it's actually appropriately leveraged. I was impressed with it.
Great. That's wonderful. And did you think that that also enabled you to, I guess, place a bet, if you will, knowing that it was a little bit different, or like, maybe leadership, or some of these, people that are business minded, of course, and want everyone to be performing best. Do you think that helped sort of the initial, sell?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, like yeah, focused on my pilot group. They were highly influential to the decision maker. Those folks, of course, were in their respective spaces. They, I'm sure, brought their own needs to coaching and being able to like survey them and seeing like, wow, like they learned and they were, again, one of my key questions on the survey was what business outcome did you drive that was
Right.
supported by coaching, and so
Yeah.
it absolutely was one of the reasons and factors into being able to bring Mento on.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's always one of those things, especially in remote cultures where it's like everyone wants a mentor, just pretty hard to find one. And then obviously there's other things that exist with mentor relationships where you just like can't be 100% honest like you can in sort of the space of a coaching engagement. So I'm glad
Yeah.
to hear that's the experience you've all had too.
Yeah. I'm doing another mentorship program at Splash. It's just for a smaller group of folks. And it's within. So like they're actually being partnered with someone that is a colleague of theirs. And you hit the nail on the head there, Jamie. Like you can't be
Yeah.
fully honest with some of like your needs, perhaps, right? I'm just thinking as
Yeah.
someone who might be getting mentored by my manager's colleague.
Yes.
That trust and that confidentiality to go with an external partner like Mento is also something that I feel our employees appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to have both, right? Like it's great to have ways to build relationships with people at the company internally, build your own internal network and your relationships, give people the opportunity to mentor others. And then, but you also kind of need to have something separate if you really want to kind of push on that growth and development and performance piece because, it's just not the same. Okay, fabulous. Thank you, Ivory, for your question. I'm going to ask it because it's a good one. So Ivory, hi, good to see you. Glad you're here. So we too will be running a pilot. Curious to know more about how you position the ROI to the business to go beyond the pilot and more of a long-term opportunity. Fabulous question. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the pilot's a smaller population. And so I think that was, just something that we took a look at. Like who were the key, like we were choosing 5 people. And expanding the pilot, it was like how many other folks that are driving key projects. And so we did align it to like projects, like who's running this project, who's running this initiative, right? There
Mm,
will be clear, like it will be clear like how that initiative and that project's going. And that's why I mentioned that, we took a look at like how it would impact OKRs and company performance. So that's how we really, at least that's how I pitched expanding the group and going into something a little bit more long term. Projects don't take it's not just like a 2 week project or a 3 week project. A lot of our OKRs are tracked over a course of quarters and annually. And so I think that's kind of how I did also stretch the opportunity so that it could be more long term.
yeah, that's interesting. And then I guess, on that ROI bit, it's definitely like a hot word in all investments that companies are making. It's always, I think, a really interesting question in the talent space. um I mean, I thought things that you said earlier that were really interesting were like cost to replace this person, the cost of attrition, cost of hiring, cost of onboarding. It sounds like you took all of that data from internally of how much it actually costs the business.
Yes. I mean, our engagement surveys, they are confidential, but they are broken up into departments. So like if a certain department was scoring low in certain areas of we have our engagement scores are based off of 5 questions, such as like you'd recommend Splash as a great place to work. You see yourself working here in 2 years' time. You there's 3 other questions, but like you
Yeah.
understand it, right? And
Yeah.
so by department, you can actually see like what departments are at risk of retention. And so being able to select someone, a key leader, let's say
Mm.
in engineering or in product, hey, like these department scores are pretty low when it comes to engagement. Like how many folks within this group, again, we're a small company, are scoring that, they do not see themselves here in 2 years' time. So that's something that, we want to look at, select maybe the leader of the group or like very key people within that group and give them Mento and see how the engagement scores change. And that's another area. And again, like we just launched Mento, right? We're looking at engagement scores from the 4 previous surveys that we did. I look forward to seeing the impact of Mento as I proceed with this partnership as well as do another round of the engagement survey and seeing how that changes for specifically like the groups where we had people participate in Mento.
Yeah. And I guess for you, but also building on that, obviously there was good indications coming out of the pilot that it would be a good return on the investment to the business, at least directionally, to kind of then move it into an annual contract,
Mhm.
expand it. Um, were there any metrics or improvements or anything that you felt really resonated at the leadership level coming out of that pilot that you were like, wow, that I feel like, a few of these things, like they really hit the team in the right way.
Metrics in terms of like the survey that I shared
Yeah,
or
maybe survey business impact that made people feel like, oh, this is a worthwhile investment. Like, yes, this is expensive, but I get it's very obvious to me how it's actually a small investment compared to like the revenue output or the impact that this person can have on an organization, especially, fast growing organizations. It's not everyone's going to be in sales where you can say, oh, well, we compared quarter over quarter and they're out, they had these revenue metrics and then now they have more. So was there any way that you were able to kind of communicate that, or you felt people maybe even came to the conclusions themselves at the leadership level?
yeah, I think that's hard because we didn't initially tie that into any like numeric output. Yeah, so I think it was much more qualitative when I like did a post pilot review.
Great. Okay, that's good to know. And I think actually one thing that you all did that was really smart, was do different levels. So you had executives and sort of that second, the level below with just sort of our like standard leadership coaching. Was there a reason that compelled you to do that? And how do you think that influenced the decision for a larger engagement?
Yeah, I think at the exec level, it was kind of like my strategy on like who does our decision maker trust in terms of like their opinions and their experience. For
Yeah.
the I think the first the management level, I think yeah, it was a selection of like who has the biggest organizations, who has the most managers underneath them, like first line managers, and then for the pilot group specifically, what areas do we need some focus on when it comes to output? And some of the previous, I would say, like years that we've had where we looked at OKRs and where we've fallen short, I think that's kind of like how we thought about like doing the selection process.
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Ivory, if you have any more questions or you want to follow up on that, of course, feel free to add to the chat. Um, Great. So I also, Jordan just kindly shared me a few other questions that have come in from some of our partners that they wanted to make sure was asked in this conversation. So I'll toss those over. Um, did you did you all do anything to sort of customize in terms of a partner summary and things like that? And how did you think about providing insight into the Splash business to the coaches that were going to be coaching the Splash folks?
What do you mean partner summary?
Do you have one of those?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, Alex, we got to get on it. That's great. Okay, we're finding opportunities together in real time. I love that. One of the things that we do with partners is make sure that they're educated, that we have information to them to educate the coaches on the business, so that they understand what's going on and can help. I mean, I think so far so good. In terms of the Splash team engagement, I think that's one of the things actually that I would love to ask you a little bit more about as well is um, the Splash participants, the employees that are engaging in Mento, seem super engaged. Uh, yeah, that's great. Next meeting agenda item. I love it. Thanks, AU. Is the is how engaged Splash employees were upon entering into the engagement. What was your special sauce there? Honestly, I think that's one of the things that we remarked about internally. We were like, wow, this is a really engaged group of folks. Clearly super bought in and also we're really prioritizing it. Like that was all very evident from sort of the initial sort of, I believe. So can you talk about that process? How did you ensure people were so engaged?
Yeah, it starts with like a kickoff that I hosted. Just pat myself on the back there. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, yeah, you did it.
But
Good, good,
no,
good job.
it
Yes, that's
really is.
awesome though.
No, but it really is getting alignment, right? Like you're not just going to
Yeah,
say, "Hey, I'm rolling this out, and you're going to get coach. Have fun. Oh, here's
yeah,
how
good luck.
to help onboard you," right? I think
Yeah.
it's really putting together a very thoughtful program internally, right? Like you guys are going to handle the external stuff. But for me as an HR leader, for the person that is going to be actually like launching this, I designed a program that involved a kickoff, very clear expectations around like what this is all about, the value of coaching. I told my own story about coaching.
Yeah.
I use anecdotes from like, we like athletes here at Splash, and so
Yeah.
utilizing, the top athletes that are always getting coached, like day in and day out, from like the morning
Yes,
that they wake up till like they're done with dinner, they're getting coached.
that's
And
right.
so like being able to just pull all those different anecdotes as well as like grounding everyone into like what coaching is. Some people
Hmm.
didn't know. Some people have never gone coached in their
Yeah,
lives. Right? And
that's
so
right.
making the very deliberate effort to educating people on what coaching is and the value of coaching and the type of transformations that can happen if you put your all in to coaching. And I
Yeah.
think that was the message that was, something I made sure I outlined as kind of like the crux of why we're even doing this. So, got throwing a little bit of motivation and inspiration in there, right? And so
Yeah, absolutely. Because
that's
people are
where,
like, I'm busy. Like, do I
yeah.
need to do another thing? Especially if they've never had coaching before. I think it's hard to know and really like, it's definitely one of those things. It's like you feel it. You're like, when you feel the impact of coaching, you're like, oh my God, how did I go without this? But if you haven't had it before and you're really busy, you're probably like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. But like, I don't know, maybe later.
Another meeting? No, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, so I think it was really like setting the tone, right? The education piece on what coaching is and the value of it, and then making a program that was frequent checking in. We have a Slack channel literally for people who are in this program. I check in very frequently, like how are things going? Did anyone get matched? Also, like putting in like facilitation questions that will generate people to chat. I said, hey, like during the onboarding phases, it was like selecting your coach, right? Said, hey,
Mm,
anyone have advice on, how your chemistry calls went and any advice for people that are still scheduling their chemistry calls? And it
so
got
cool.
the dialogue happening in that Slack channel, and people started to get excited, like, oh wow, that was awesome what so and so said, and I'm gonna take my chemistry calls very seriously now. So being able to generate that kind of conversation. And then again, we have our quarterly check-in next week. I have a full like 1.5 hour agenda of like breakout sessions, what you're learning from Mento. So making it much more
Mhm.
programmatic versus just, hey, here's something, here's a perk, hope you use it. Have a nice day. And so being very deliberate with the kickoff, the check-ins, creating a community so that people can have conversations. And then yeah, the 360 was also something that I launched as part of the program. I think I mentioned this earlier, but
Yep.
360 is, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking, like, oh my gosh, I'm getting feedback, people are giving me feedback. But then to position it in a way where I'm sharing like, hey, like this person that's gonna see this is your coach. You're already building trust with your coach, and your
Yeah.
coach is gonna help you consolidate all the like information and be able to use it to really help you in certain areas to help you grow. And so
Yeah.
that was another part of the program. And, at the end of the year, it's the whole pitch. Like, you're going to love it when you have done a 360 and then you're going to do another one and be able to see like how you've grown. That's where we're trying to get at that growth, and people get motivated by that.
Yeah, that's really amazing. That's fabulous. And I love that you build community. One of the things that we see a lot is that it's very much like most things, social proof really matters. And in the scenario in particular, it's social proof from your peers and the people that you work with and your colleagues, and maybe other senior leaders as well, which is also why I think it's a great idea to have at least a few executives in it because, oh wow, X person, my boss's boss as a coach. These people, it really does set a great foundation and motivation and inspiration that it's not like that this is a real investment. I mean, to think that, you're getting a coach alongside other senior leaders at your company, I think really and shows people and not just tells them how important it is at sort of at the culture level. And I guess through that, have you seen any sort of cultural changes around becoming more of like a coaching culture as people are, as more and more people are in coaching and experiencing and benefiting from it?
I have seen personal changes from the people that have been participating, and
Wow.
I think that when I hear people outside of the coaching group make comments like, "Wow, this person is XYZ or has like improved in so and so," I'm like, "Oh yeah, they're getting coached," and it's like, "Oh wow, that's like
Oh,
an aha moment of like
yeah.
thing that we are, doing and helping with is supporting their growth. Again, it's very early. I do hope to
Yes,
see changes in the
absolutely.
engagement survey as
Yeah.
it comes at the end of the year. I hope to see like the participants, their scores from themselves from when they first started and took that survey to when they take it
Yeah.
again. I hope I see growth there. And I look forward to our quarterly
I
meetup.
know we'll have to do a follow-up on this.
Mhm.
Um uh and we'll do a part two that, goes over what happened now or what happened afterward. But I guess I think this has been a really fabulous conversation and just I've learned more things. I've learned from you, and I just really appreciate how thoughtful you've been. I mean, how lucky is the Splash team to have such a thoughtful, dedicated, and inspiring and motivating HR leader. So they're so lucky to have you. And it's clear that it's an amazing place to work because of so much of what you've done. So just wanted to say kudos to you. It's not an easy thing to do. So I really admire and respect what you've done there.
Thanks, Jamie. I hate compliments, so I'm about to shrink into.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's fine. We'll just wrap this up with a final question. But you can maybe talk to your coach about receiving an area for growth. We know we're always learning and growing here. But I guess just final question for you. I guess is there anything if you were okay now that you're a year and yes, you're still early on in the journey, but I would say overall, like you've accomplished a lot in terms of you've accomplished a ton in terms of changing how the organization, like it's not obviously not just about Mento, it's about investing in talent in such a meaningful way and shifting that organizationally, culturally from basically, it sounded like when you started, even though there was something before, there was nothing actually in place. So to think about how you've changed the culture in a year, I mean, it's pretty amazing. It's quite amazing. So looking back on this year, what's the biggest learning, and especially for folks on the call that are kind of entering into this space, like what's your biggest learning? If there was one thing that you could do differently, what would it be? If one thing you could do more of, what would that be as well?
As it pertains to Mento?
Yeah, you're just in overall sort of like I would say yes, we know we know Mento is great, but it's just in terms of like I would say shifting the culture
Mhm.
or encouraging the culture to make this adjustment to think about where you were as an organization when you started to where you are now in terms of how you all think about developing talent and growing folks.
I think, it's so interesting that we're having this conversation today. We just had our all hands this morning where
Yeah.
I mentioned this. I showcased our engagement survey results.
Yeah.
And this time around, since we've done it 4 times, I got to show them our scores every time we did it. And you see these gradual increases, which
Yeah.
makes me incredibly proud. But
Yeah.
it shows the people that these surveys are taken seriously. I think a lot of people also think like, oh, I take the survey, nothing's going to happen. Well,
Yeah.
we have made very conscientious steps in order to help with our most lower scoring engagement factors. And this is one of them. This is one of the areas that we're investing in. There are a lot of areas that we saw very high jumps in, like, improvements in.
Mhm.
And I got to list out all the things that we did from an HR perspective, but also from a leadership perspective to increase like those categories. And so what that does is really fill our people with confidence that their voice matters, that people are listening to what their concerns are. And I think, being action oriented when you're doing things like this and being intentional is just like the key because
Yeah.
the results will come. And so while
Mhm.
this is our first time doing Mento and we're trying this out and we're gonna hope to see really positive results, I'm confident that we will, one, but I'm also confident that even just trying this is going to resonate really well with our people
Yeah.
because they will see that, hey, at least there's effort being put in to certain areas that we had voiced as potentially things that are missing for our experience here at Splash.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, and you're right. Just trying and showing that you're investing and listening is just the first step. And that matters so much to people, even if you don't get it 100% right on the first try. It's like you don't want to see organizations that are ignoring you or not listening. And yeah, that's wonderful. Well, this was the perfect note to end on. So thank you so much, Quynh, for taking the time, especially when you're so busy, and coming back from an offsite. And thank you for your partnership. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I have loved my experience with Mento and I cannot speak such more positive things about it. So happy to.
Yes, we appreciate that. And thank you so much. And have a beautiful rest of the day. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you.